Welcome, everybody, to Service and Sacrifice this week here on WTEN Plus. I'm Ryan Peterson. With me, as always, Dom and Emil. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are we getting ever closer to that first day of summer? We've had some really nice days out there recently.
Yeah, it's been great.
You've got the boat in the water, yes?
Yes, I have the boat in the water.
Yes. I haven't gotten an invite yet, but that's okay. That's all right. I'm not complaining. How about you, Emil? Have you been invited out on the boat?
I've been given no information, not even if it's within the state where he's got it parked. So, no.
It's top secret. Secret. We have a wonderful guest that's going to actually be joining us for the next 2 weeks in a row here on Service and Sacrifice because he's got a lot to say, and it's something that's really important for our veterans. So we talk about a lot, and that's mental health, but specifically post-traumatic stress disorder, the suicide epidemic in this country that has gripped our veterans. Andrew Berry, Doc Berry, psychologist, psychoanalyst. Dom, you brought Doc to my attention. Where did you first meet him, and when did he hit your radar?
So Doc Berry hit my radar, I would say almost just about a year ago. He's known around the veteran community, so I've always heard his name and heard about his talks, but I actually just recently met him physically and went to one of his events when Kevin Shepard, I don't remember, you remember when Kevin Shepard was here? He invited us to a mental health summit over at the Greenwich Central School District. I went there to represent the VA and listened to Doc and what he had to say in his event. And he is very good at translating what a lot of us veterans think. He's very good with explaining the feelings that we have. What family members should do. He's just really good at really translating that feeling, those thoughts that we all come back with. And it's important to go to these summits because a lot of us don't understand that. A lot of us don't know how to translate that, how to tell that to our spouses, our children, our grandkids, our communities that we're involved in. So it was really neat. So I really made a real big effort to really introduce Channel 10 News, Service and Sacrifice to Doc Berry, and I'm glad to hear him soon. So it's very good. It's very eye-opening. If you're a veteran and you have, you think you have PTSD or you may have these symptoms, I really urge you to really listen to this episode. It's going to be really important for us.
Looking forward to it. Highly educated man, speaks all over the country. Not only does he have a very, lucrative private practice, but he's addressed NATO. Again, these talks all over the country with regards to our servicemen and women and what they're dealing with when they come home and trying to transition back into that civilian life. He also has a podcast of his own, two docs and a grunt, that he'll mention, I'm sure, at some point as well, that you can find on YouTube. Emil, we always talk about the older generations of veterans and how difficult it is for them to ask for help, for any veteran for that matter. And of course, that's something we'll be talking with Doc about as well. And while I have you both here, and this is a personal question that I don't think I've ever asked either of you, as veterans yourselves, have either of you sought out the help of a therapist in the past?
I've met with some, spoke with them, and to be honest with you, my generation had other issues that we couldn't even identify as military or veterans. And to come up with any of these discussions was next to impossible. I've listened to some of the things that he's discussed, and I just got to say that it makes me think internally about my own service and the things that we experienced. And I think I wish I had spoken to somebody years ago about it.
I have. So 2017 was my year, and I spoke to a doctor. Her name was Dr. Amanda Leroy with the VA, and that woman saved my life. Tremendous pressure uplifted once I went to therapy. It took me 16, 17 years from serving to actually see a therapist because I was very hard-headed. That stigma's real. Don't if you're weak, don't be weak. All that, and God, that doctor helped me. She lifted quite a bit off my shoulders. So and that's why I'm a huge advocate for Therapist VA Medical Center, because it's given me a second chance at life. And that's why I do everything that I do. That's why I volunteer in communities. I do whatever I can to help everyone out, just veterans out, just because I feel like I've had a second chance at life. So.
Well, please stay tuned, because coming up after this quick break, Doc Berry's going to be sitting between those two gentlemen right there, and we're going to get into all of that and a lot more. You're watching Service and Sacrifice here on WTEN Plus. Welcome back to Service and Sacrifice. As promised, we are joined by our guest, Andrew Berry, otherwise known as Doc. Doc, thanks for coming in today.
Happy to be here.
Great
Thanks
to
for
meet
having
you.
me.
Thanks for coming in.
Yep.
As we were discussing before we brought you into the room, I'm going to talk a little bit today about PTSD, what causes it, what it does to the brains of our veterans when they come home. But before we get into all of that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you got into this and began treating our men and women in uniform.
Okay. Yes, I'm Andrew Berry, also known as Doc Berry. I'm a psychologist and psychoanalyst, and I have private practice over in Niskayuna. I was raised around veterans when I was a kid. My father and grandfather served during World War II. Most of the neighbors were vets. I came from an area where being a veteran was the rule, not the exception. And it was the greatest generation. Those, our fathers and grandfathers, those were the ones running the country. So I was exposed to what they chose to talk about their service. And that's the generation that always added a funny spin. They didn't talk about the heavier stuff. But as a little kid, I always had a sense that there was a lot more that they weren't saying. And I was starting to see at that time the beginnings of the 1,000-yard stare on their faces. So after high school, it turned into one degree after another. I won't quote the whole resume because it's going to sound like I'm bragging and it'd take too much time. But how I came to work with this patient population is I didn't choose them. They chose me. Now, what that means is a little broader. I do have an honorable discharge from the Marine Corps. I did not see combat. I'm very open about that. I did 4 or 5 years as a volunteer firefighter and EMT. Hardly saw anything. I'm very open about that. These guys have a right to know who and what they are drinking with, so to speak. But for whatever reason, they take a look at this 6.5-foot angry Santa with the odd hat, and they say to themselves, "This is the guy I'm going to talk to." And I hear about the stuff that does not make the newspapers. I hear about what goes on in combat. And the clinical significance of that is I am honored because it's tantamount to that individual giving me a piece of their soul. I do this to the tune of like 40 to 45 sessions every week. I present around the country. I am part of a webcast effort known as Two Docs and a Grunt. I'm Doc number 1. Doc number 2 is Navy Cross recipient Luis Fonseca, retired Navy corpsman. And the Grunt is a Marine Mustang by the name of Nate Emery. He retired out after 33 years of total service. And this is pretty much all I do. I'm a one-trick pony. I say rather flippantly, I'm the PTSD guy.
When we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, especially for our veterans, our first responders, as you said, they're sharing things with you that they have shared with no one, things most of us couldn't even fathom, I would imagine, what they've seen, what they've witnessed, what they've been through. How hard is it for them to first initially get that out? And what have been some of the root causes for these folks?
All right. Asking for help for vets and first responders is the hardest thing they've ever done because they have been trained to do exactly the opposite, to never ask for help. to see to everybody else's well-being and to be the caretaker of everybody around them, and to ask for help bring about feelings of being stigmatized, feelings of shame, feelings of being weak, etc. And what I tell all of them, and I hope this will make it into what we are doing today. I was having a conversation with one of my Marines a number of years ago, a guy by the name of Joe Marine. Where have we heard this before? And he said with that magnificent New York accent of his, he says, Doc, I hate to ask for help. And I said, really? And I said to him, you told me a long time ago I can ask you anything about combat. And he goes, shoot, Doc, any question, what do you want to know? And I said, all right, here's a hypothetical scenario. You're either out in the dunes, you're in the bush, you know the bad guys are coming around the corner in about 5 minutes. Your weapon's jammed, you don't have any ordnance to begin with, but you have a working radio. What are you going to do? And he said, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get on that radio and then he looks at me and he curses me out. I can't use the language here but it was done warmly. And he said, and I said, you mean you're actually going to ask for help? And he goes, yeah, you made your point. And now he tells that story and laughs, because there is no difference at the end of the day between asking for help out in the bush or in the dunes versus asking for help here. It's backup. It's essential. Yeah. Why can't we do that same sort of thing all the time?
The gentleman sitting here to your left from our Vietnam era,
yep.
Emil, a lot of guys of your generation are in that boat, right? Asking for help. I'm curious, Doc, do you see the newer generation, the gentleman to your right here, and Dom, folks from that global war on terror effort, are things getting easier for them to ask for that help as opposed to the older generation, or has that remained a steady?
The stigma has changed. The stigma has decreased, but it's moving at a glacial pace, and it needs to get stepped up because we have a suicide epidemic in this country. And I'll go on record as saying I think it's much more than 22 a day. I think that's a catchy little catchphrase. I think the numbers are much higher. And fortunately, the younger folks are better at asking for help. And when I do the PTSD presentation, which Dom has seen me do up close and in the flesh, the young guys will come to me, but also it's starting to happen that if there just so happen to be any Vietnam guys, they'll come up to me afterward and I'll look them square in the eye and say, how did I do? And they pretty much say the same thing. It was too good, Doc. And they're in tears. So that's how I'm getting through to them.
I'm going to have you hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break here on Service and Sacrifice. When we come back, we'll get into more exactly kind of what this does to the human brain. More with Doc Berry right after this. Welcome back here on Service and Sacrifice, joined once again by psychologist, psychoanalyst Andrew Doc Berry with us here this week. We were talking before the break about the difficulty our veterans have in asking for that help. When it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder, obviously everything they've seen and witnessed is so traumatizing. But I wonder if you could give us kind of an idea, Doc, of what actually happens to the brain in instances like that.
Okay. I would like to I'll try to make it as short as I can, a story before, because I hope this doesn't get edited out, but it's crucial. All right. I started my career as a diagnostician in a state-run Supermax out in Kansas, and I've told this story many times. Dom has heard me tell it as well. And it was my job out there to interview an inmate, read his rap sheet, check out programs, type up a report, send him on his way. Not very helpful for mental health. It's all about fast food classification, nothing else. And one guy came in. He was a Vietnam veteran, and I checked out his rap sheet. And everything that brought him to prison, it was all alcohol related. DWI, domestic violence, DWI. He'd been divorced like 2 or 3 times. His wives couldn't stand him. His kids wrote him off years prior. And he came back to a country that didn't care or was hostile to him after seeing his father serving during World War II and coming back to ticker tape parades and a hero's welcome. The betrayal defies description. So when I am working with the combat guys, I will ask them, who do you miss the most? And normally they will tell me about their best friend killed right in front of them in very graphic detail. Okay? But what this guy gave me in one sentence, I've been unpacking for 20 years. I asked him, who do you miss the most? And the color surged to his forehead, his face, the veins were sticking out. He burst into tears. And he half shouted, Doc, he says, I miss me. I used to be a nice guy. That is one of the heaviest statements you'll ever hear, and I hope that makes it on the camera. That story is essential. Now, what he was speaking about was that post-traumatic stress disorder goes far beyond what we know of in terms of nightmares, anxiety, depression, flashbacks, hypervigilance, dissociation, concentration difficulties, detachment, emotional numbing. What it speaks to is the brain after episodes of repeated trauma of combat, which means unimaginable noise, no sleep for days or even weeks at a time, the screams, the blood, the body parts, etc. What it speaks to is that it affects the central nervous system. In plainer English than that, the brain changes. The physiology of the brain changes. The biochemistry of the brain changes. All right. Without going too much into the weeds in that area, because physiology is not my forte, think of it this way. The animal brain, fight or flight, because of repeated trauma, tends to get bigger, okay? Actually, it expands, while the higher reasoning, the prefrontal cortex, gets smaller. Now, what this means in plain English, to a certain extent, these guys and gals their thermostats are set on permanent high to one degree or another for the rest of their lives. A number of years ago, it was one of the final reunions of the 1st Marine Division, the guys who served during World War II. And they brought out these magnificent old war horses for a convention or something like that, a dedication. And it was a large enough room, they had to use microphones. And somebody who was in charge of setting this up didn't quite know what they were doing. And you test a microphone by tapping on it, right? This guy tapped on that microphone, and these magnificent old war horses were on the verge of just ducking under the table because they thought it was an explosion. That is what I mean when I say your thermostat is set on perma high, because to those guys, it sounds like an explosion or something terrible is about to happen. I have a noisy radiator in my consulting room that was installed during the administration of James K. Polk, okay? And when the water kicks in, it makes a sound like a small gunshot with an echo. I have to warn everybody who comes in, you're going to hear that noise. It's a radiator. We are not under attack. That's how long this stuff lasts. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, it absolutely does. And it brings me around to something I read about you before you came in today, specifically as we get into this time of year here, the 4th of July.
Yep.
250th anniversary of these United States, all kinds of celebrations, as there are every year, with fireworks. Now, you just mentioned just the tapping on a microphone can set some of our veterans off. I can't imagine what a night full of fireworks is like.
Well, yes, to all of the above. Not all of them. Some enjoy them. Some, this is not one size fits all.
Right.
Some of them actually enjoy. Most, on the other hand, I've heard episodes of using hearing protection, noise-canceling headphones, vomiting, diving underneath their beds, having to be heavily medicated during the entire night, because we're talking about explosions, and that brings them right back to the combat that they are trying to forget.
This has been a tremendous conversation. We're going to invite Doc Berry back here with us next week. We're going to talk more then about, aside from talking to him directly and getting that help, what else can our veterans, first responders, people dealing with that post-traumatic stress do to better their lives?
Bring it on.
Bring those people back to themselves, right? Doc Berry, thanks so much. It was a pleasure meeting you, and we'll see you right back here next week.
Amen.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Back after this on Service and Sacrifice. Welcome back to Service and Sacrifice as we wrap up our first visit here with Doc Berry. And Dom, I got to say, thank you so much for bringing him to our attention here at Service and Sacrifice. What a conversation. To hear him so eloquently explain what our servicemen and women have gone through, what exactly post-traumatic stress means, what it does to the brain itself, chemically, biologically, it opened my eyes quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm still amazed by that. He explains it better than a dictionary, and he explains it that way because he's seen it through so many patients that he's just able to really transcribe that so fluently and allow us to really understand what goes on in the brains of any service member or, emergency technician that sees, some tragedies, whether it's EMT or in combat or any of those things. So it's really eye-opening.
We heard the reality of this issue. We heard a real person, a warm, understanding person that can listen and talk to us about it and make us open up. I think he's amazing.
Well, that's just it. And he talked about how difficult it is to open up. And Dom, you said at the top of the show how difficult it was for you and the years that it took you to finally get in and seek the help that you thought you needed. But what I loved about his story was him talking even just about his appearance and his demeanor and how, for a lot of cases, for people that see him in private practice, that is really kind of what drew them to him and helped them open up. They're like, okay, here's not, and he was funny when I first met him and I referred to him as Dr. Berry. He said, no, that's too stuffy, right? And I think for a lot of people, that helps, right? You're not sitting there in front of somebody in a suit and tie that has all kinds of certificates on the wall, which is commendable. But when you're trying to break through to somebody, right, and get them to open up, I think that's pretty commendable.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that veterans feel when they're going to talk or say something is they're going to be judged, right? In the military, they judge you if you're sick. They judge you if you get hurt. You're like, oh, he's weak, he can't take it, And I understand that the military is thinks that way. I totally get and understand why. But when we get out, we have to kind of separate us from that thought process. And, it's when you go into that office and you see a doctor there and they're dressed up, you're like, oh, I'm going to get judged. Here we go. And it's really the opposite. So don't, for any of these any of our veterans, if you're watching this episode and this segment, just know, don't feel judged. Whether it's a suit or a guy in a beard, you got to open your mouth. You have to open your mouth. You have to be seen. That's the important thing.
Well, his honesty and his reality comes through, and that's something we can trust, and veterans can open up more easily to a person like that, a humanity and a person that cares.
And if anyone has a hard time explaining this or trying to understand this, I urge all our viewers to share this episode. If you don't know, if you can't express yourself, do it by at least sharing this. Spread the word about PTSD. Spread the word about opening our mouths. Spread the word on how to receive health. At the very least, that's what we can do, is just spread the word to our veterans. Help them understand that it's okay to speak up. Help them understand that it's okay to open your mouth. Help them understand that everything's going to be okay. So if for all our viewers, please spread this episode. It's a good one. I'm really looking forward to hearing Doc next week. That's going to
be when he comes back next week, we're going to be talking about what our veterans can do to help themselves besides getting that one-on-one counseling with someone like himself. And how can friends, family, loved ones help them come to grips with what they're dealing with as well? So we'll see Doc Berry right here again next week. Until then, thanks for watching Service and Sacrifice. Remember, you can find us on Roku, on Apple TV, or on Amazon Fire. Go in the App Store on any one of those platforms. Download the WTN Plus app. You see us every Friday morning at 10 a.m. and also on YouTube as well. We'll see you next week.